Fly home. Don't say anything to your mother and brother. That text came in at 6:47 a.m. while I sat on a sunlit balcony in Hilton Head Island, watching my mother laugh for the first time in 21 years, at something my brother said. An unknown number. No name. 7 words that turned my stomach to ice. 12 hours later, I was standing in the arrivals hall of Hartford Bradley Airport. A man in a gray suit held a sign with my name. Next to him, 2 police officers, and what they showed me in that conference room. I don't remember hitting the floor. I just remember waking up to fluorescent lights and a paramedic asking me to count backward from 10. That was 4 months ago. I still don't sleep through the night. But I need to tell you everything. Because what my family did, and what I did about it, changed who I am forever. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and your local time in the comments. My name is Willow Farrell. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how my own mother and brother tried to destroy me, and how the truth saved my life. Now let me take you back to a rainy November night in Glastonbury, Connecticut, the night I stopped being someone's daughter. I was 11 years old. It was a Tuesday, November 14th. I remember the date because I'd brought home a permission slip for a field trip to the Wadsworth Atheneum, the art museum in Hartford. I needed a parent's signature and $3. That's it. A signature and $3. My mother, Margaret Farrell, was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. She had the phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was calm, flat, like she was reading a grocery list. "It's done," she said. "She's leaving tonight." I didn't know who she was talking to. I still don't. She hung up and looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on a countertop, something to wipe clean. "Pack your things," she said. I thought she meant for the field trip. I actually smiled. "You're leaving, tonight." My brother Dean stood at the top of the stairs. He was 14. He watched the whole thing, didn't say a word, didn't move. Just leaned on the railing like he was watching a show that didn't concern him. My mother opened the front door. Rain was hammering the porch. She handed me a black garbage bag, the kind you use for yard waste, and said 4 words I will hear for the rest of my life. "Go, don't come back." No suitcase, no coat, no explanation, no $3. I walked 3 miles in that rain. My sneakers filled with water by the second block. The garbage bag ripped at the corner of Hebron Avenue, and my library book fell into a puddle. I made it to my grandfather's house on Hubbard Street at 9:20. When he opened the door, he didn't ask what happened. He didn't call Margaret. He just knelt on the wet porch, wrapped his arms around me, and said, "You're home now, little bird." That was the last time anyone in my family held me for 21 years. My grandfather, Walter Ashford, was a retired civil engineer who lived like he'd never earned a dollar past his pension. Small Cape Cod house, vegetable garden out back. A workshop in the garage where he fixed clocks, radios, anything with gears. He wore the same 3 flannel shirts on rotation and drank his coffee black from a mug that said, "World's okayest Grandpa." My grandmother Rosemary was the warmth in that house. She taught me how to make pot roast on Sundays. She braided my hair before school. She read to me every night, even when I was 12 and probably too old for it. I never stopped her. For 7 years, that small house on Hubbard Street was the only place I felt real. Margaret never called. Not once. Dean didn't write. No birthday card, no Christmas visit. Nothing. It was as if I'd been erased from their lives with the same ease my mother used to wipe the kitchen counter. My grandfather never forced the subject, but once, when I was 13 and crying in the garage because a girl at school asked why my mom didn't come to the parent conference, he set down his wrench and said something I didn't understand until decades later. "Someday you'll understand why I'm saving the best for you. Not now, but someday." I noticed things, small things. A man in a gray suit who visited my grandfather every few months. They'd sit in the study with the door closed. I'd hear low voices but never full sentences. When I asked who the man was, Grandpa said, An old friend helping with paperwork. I didn't push. I was just grateful to have a home. My grandmother Rosemary passed when I was 16. A stroke, quick and merciful. And the house on Hubbard Street got a little quieter, a little colder. But my grandfather kept going, for me, I think. He drove me to campus tours. He proofread my college essays. He kept a locked oak box on the top shelf of his closet that he never opened in front of me. I asked him once what was inside. He smiled and said, "Your future." My grandfather died in his sleep 3 weeks before I started college. I found him on a Saturday morning, still in his flannel, one hand resting on a book about covered bridges. He looked peaceful. He looked done. The funeral was small. 6 neighbors, the pastor from the Methodist church on Main Street, a woman who ran the hardware store where Grandpa bought his nails, and then Margaret walked in. I hadn't seen my mother in 7 years. She wore black from head to toe. A silver cross hung from her neck. She moved through the church like a widow in a movie, touching pews, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, whispering, "Thank you," to strangers who offered condolences. She never looked at me. Not once. But Dean did. He walked right up to where I was sitting in the front pew, leaned down, and said something so quietly that only I could hear it. "Grandpa left everything to Mom. There's nothing for you." Then he smiled. A quick one. The kind that vanishes before anyone else sees it. After the service, a man approached me in the parking lot. Gray suit. I recognized him. The man who used to visit Grandpa's study. "Miss Farrell," he said. "My name is Thomas Mercer. I was your grandfather's attorney for 30 years. He held out a cream-colored envelope, sealed with wax. Old-fashioned, deliberate. "Your grandfather asked me to give you this when the time is right." He paused. "The time isn't now, but keep my card." I took the card. I took the envelope. I put both in my wallet and didn't touch them again. I rode the bus back to my dorm alone that night. No family left, no safety net. 18 years old with a sealed envelope I was too afraid to open, and a business card from a man in a gray suit who said, "The time isn't now." I didn't know that those 2 pieces of paper would save my life 14 years later. I paid for college the way a lot of people do. Scholarships, part-time jobs, and ramen noodles 5 nights a week. I studied computer science at UConn, graduated with honors, and moved to San Francisco with $600 and a carry-on suitcase. I didn't call it ambition back then. I called it not having a choice. By 24, I was working 80-hour weeks at a startup in Soma, writing code for an app I didn't believe in, eating lunch at my desk, and sleeping in a studio apartment the size of a parking space. Nobody in my family knew where I was. Nobody asked. But something was growing. Not resentment. Purpose. I kept thinking about the kids I'd met in college who'd aged out of foster care with nothing. No family. No guidance. No one to call when the landlord raised the rent or the car broke down or the loneliness got so heavy it pressed on their chest like concrete. I knew that feeling. I'd lived it. At 27, I built Hearthline. It was a simple platform. Match kids aging out of the system with volunteer mentors who'd show up. Not charity. Presence. Someone to answer the phone. By 30, a venture fund believed in it enough to invest. The company was valued at $47 million. On paper, I was wealthy. In practice, I was still the girl in sneakers walking 3 miles in the rain. My only real friend was Grace Kimball, a nurse I'd met at the UConn Library freshman year. She was from Brockton, Massachusetts. Direct. Stubborn. The kind of person who'd tell you your haircut was terrible before asking how your day went. Grace knew everything about my past, and she had one rule about my family. "If they ever come back," she told me once over Thai food in the Mission, "it's not because they miss you, it's because they need something." I believed her. Mostly. But there's a difference between believing something in your head and believing it in the part of you that still keeps a garbage bag in the back of your closet, just in case. One night, years later, I found a line buried in my UConn financial aid records. Part of my scholarship had been funded by an anonymous educational trust. No name, no trail, just a deposit every semester like clockwork. I couldn't trace it. But I had a feeling I already knew. The call came on a Wednesday, 9:14 p.m. Pacific Time. I was on my couch in San Francisco, half watching a documentary about bridge engineering, a habit I'd inherited from Grandpa, when my phone lit up with a Connecticut area code. I almost didn't answer. I wish I hadn't. Willow? The voice was older, shakier, but unmistakable. It's your mother. Silence. Mine, not hers. I know I don't deserve this call. She told me she'd been diagnosed with early-stage cancer. She said she'd been going to church every week. She said she'd changed. She said the word sorry 4 times in 2 minutes, and each time it sounded more rehearsed than the last. Then she said the thing that cracked me open. I want us to be together. All of us. Before it's too late. A vacation. Hilton Head Island. As a family. She paused. Dean wants to apologize too. I said no. She cried. I hung up and called Grace. Cancer card? Grace said. Classic manipulation. Don't go. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I stared at the ceiling and argued with myself the way only someone who's been abandoned can argue. Half logic, half that desperate little voice that still whispers, maybe this time will be different. On the 3rd night, I picked up the framed photo on my nightstand. Me and Grandpa, sitting on his porch, the summer I was 15. He was smiling like he knew something I didn't. He'd want me to try. I was sure of it. I called Margaret back. I'll come. 3 days. Not 5. I'm booking my own flight and my own room. She agreed to everything instantly. No pushback? No negotiation. That should have been my first warning. 20 minutes later, a text from an unknown number. Be careful. 2 words. No name. I thought it was spam. I deleted it. That was my second warning. And I missed it completely. Hilton Head in late September is the kind of beautiful that feels borrowed, like it can't possibly last. Spanish moss, salt air, sunset light that makes everything look like a painting someone forgot to sign. I flew into Savannah and drove the 45 minutes to the resort, a beachfront property, valet parking, the kind of place that puts orchids in the lobby and charges $12 for orange juice. Dean had booked it. I didn't ask with whose money. Margaret was waiting in the lobby. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Her hair had gone silver at the temples, and she wore a pale blue cardigan that made her look like a Sunday school teacher. When she saw me, she opened her arms and started crying before I even reached her. You're so beautiful, she said into my shoulder. You look just like your grandmother. Dean stood behind her, taller now, broader, a pressed linen shirt, leather watch, salon-quality smile. He extended his hand like we were meeting at a business conference. Hey sis, long time. He introduced his girlfriend, Amber Jennings. 28. Blonde hair, straight teeth, quick laugh. She shook my hand with both of hers and said, I've heard so much about you. In a voice that sounded like customer service. Dinner that first night was almost normal. Almost. Margaret talked about her church group. Dean talked about his real estate career. Amber laughed at all of Dean's jokes. Nobody mentioned the 21 years, but I noticed things. Dean asked twice what I did for a living. Then he asked if I rented or owned. Then, are you comfortable? Financially, I mean. Families should take care of each other. I gave vague answers, smiled, ate my fish, and when I got back to my room, I checked my phone. A new text from that same unknown number. Did your brother ask about money yet? This time, I didn't delete it. I took a screenshot. The next morning, Margaret suggested family photos on the beach. Something to remember this by, she said. I agreed. What harm could photos do? Plenty, it turns out, when your mother uses them as a stage. She flagged down a resort employee to take the pictures, and while the young woman adjusted the angle, Margaret leaned in and said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, My daughter came back to me after years of running away. She's always been the stubborn one. Running away. As if I'd left by choice. As if I hadn't been pushed out a door at 11 with a trash bag in the rain. I didn't correct her. I stood there in the sand with my arm around a woman who'd rewritten my childhood for an audience of strangers, and I smiled for the camera. Dropped half an octave. Look, I'll be dropped half an octave. Look, I'll be honest. I've hit some rough patches, a few debts, nothing major. He shrugged like a man describing a parking ticket. Have you ever thought about investing together, as siblings? I'm not in a position to invest, I said. He pivoted fast. You know Grandpa left everything to Mom, right? His house, his savings? Not a lot, honestly. He was watching my face, testing. I didn't know the details, I said. Which was true. That night, I was brushing my teeth when I heard voices in the hallway outside my door. Margaret and Dean. Low, tense. She doesn't know, Margaret said. Keep going. She's suspicious, Dean replied. Then be better at it. I pressed my back against the bathroom wall. My toothbrush was still in my mouth. My hands were shaking. I waited until the hallway went quiet. Then I picked up my phone and texted the unknown number. Who are you? 3 minutes passed. Then, someone your grandfather trusted. Morning, day 3. The last day I'd agreed to stay. Dean came to breakfast carrying a manila folder. He set it on the table between the salt shaker and the butter dish, casual as a newspaper. So, I've been looking into Grandpa's estate, he said. Turns out there's property and accounts that were never properly distributed. He opened the folder and slid a stapled document toward me. Mom and I think it's fair if we all sign this, just to consolidate things under one family trust. I picked it up. The header read, Family Trust Agreement, Ashford/Farrell Estate. I'm not a lawyer, but I've spent 5 years reviewing contracts for my company. I know what a power of attorney clause looks like when it's dressed up in family language. And this document was handing Dean full control over every asset tied to the Ashford name. I need time to read this properly, I said. It's just a formality. Dean leaned back. Mom already signed. Margaret pulled my hand back. I said I need time. Pulled my hand back. I said I need time. Dean's jaw tightened. Amber glanced at him, then looked down at her phone. Back in my room, I photographed every page and sent the images to my attorney in San Francisco. 2 hours later, he called. Don't sign anything, he said. This document would give your brother control over assets you might not even know you have. I sat on the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed. The unknown number. Longer this time. Fly home. Don't say anything to your mother and brother. There's a flight at 6 a.m. from Savannah. Take it. A car will be waiting at Hartford. Don't be afraid. I sat on that bed for an hour staring at the message. My hands were shaking. I kept thinking, what if this is a scam? What if someone is trying to separate me from my family again? But then I thought, what family? The one that kicked me out at 11? The one that just slid a trap across the breakfast table and called it legacy? I had to choose, and I chose to trust a stranger over my own blood. Would you have done the same? I still don't know if it was courage or just survival instinct. Let me know in the comments, because even now, 4 months later, I go back and forth. I set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. and didn't sleep at all. 4:30 a.m. Still dark. The resort hallway smelled like chlorine and hibiscus. I grabbed my carry-on. I never unpack fully in places I might need to leave, and took the service stairs to the ground floor. No checkout. No note. I ordered an Uber from the parking lot and watched the resort shrink in the rearview mirror as we pulled onto Highway 278. The driver was a retired schoolteacher named Donna. She asked if I was heading home. I said yes. That was the truest thing I'd said in 3 days. At Savannah Hilton Head International, I checked in for the 6 a.m. flight to Hartford. The gate was half empty. A businessman, a mother with a sleeping toddler. Me, sitting in a plastic chair with a coffee I couldn't drink, rehearsing goodbye speeches I'd never give. I texted Grace from the boarding line. Something is very wrong. I'm leaving. I'll call you when I land. Grace, bless her. Thank God. The plane lifted off at 6:05. I watched the coastline tilt and fall away. The island, the resort, the family I'd let myself believe in for 72 stupid, hopeful hours. My phone buzzed at 7:30. Dean. Where are you? Mom is worried sick. Then Margaret. Willow, please don't do this to me again. Then Dean, 1 minute later. We need to talk about the trust. It's important. 3 messages in 10 minutes. Concern, guilt, then pressure. A perfect escalation. I'd watched Margaret do this my whole childhood. The soft open, the wounded middle, the sharp close. Dean had learned well. I turned off my phone and leaned my forehead against the window. And that's when I felt it in my jacket pocket. A business card, soft with age, its edges worn to felt. Thomas Mercer, attorney at law. I'd carried it in my wallet for 14 years, transferred it to jacket after jacket, never knowing why I couldn't throw it away. Now I knew. Hartford Bradley Airport, Gate B4. I walked through the jetway with my carry-on over one shoulder and the feeling that I was about to step into someone else's story. I was right. A man stood in the arrivals area holding a small sign, W. Farrell. Gray suit, silver hair, 70-ish. Beside him, 2 Connecticut State Police officers in pressed uniforms, hands at their sides. Not aggressive, but present. The man lowered the sign when he saw me. Miss Farrell, my name is Thomas Mercer. I was your grandfather Walter Ashford's attorney for 30 years. He offered his hand. Steady grip, kind eyes. We need to talk, privately. They led me to a small conference room near the airline offices. Beige walls, a round table, 4 chairs. Thomas sat across from me and placed 3 items on the table with the precision of a man who'd rehearsed this moment. A bound document, a sealed envelope, cream-colored, wax seal, handwriting I recognized as my grandmother Rosemary's, and a thick folder, tabbed and labeled. Your grandfather drafted this will in 2012, Thomas said. It names you, Willow Farrell, as the sole beneficiary of his entire estate. I stared at him. That includes the house on Hubbard Street, savings accounts, investment holdings accumulated over 40 years. He paused. The estimated value is $2.8 million. The room tilted. I gripped the table. He instructed me to execute the will when 2 conditions were met. First, you turned 32. Second, your family made contact with you. Why those conditions? Because he knew they'd only come back if they found out about the money. Thomas opened the thick folder. But that's not why the police are here. He spread a series of printed screenshots across the table, text messages, between Dean and a contact saved as V. The first one read, "She's here. Room 412. If she doesn't sign by Thursday, go to Plan B." The reply, "Plan B costs double." Dean's response, "Whatever it takes." Thomas introduced the woman sitting quietly at the end of the table. I hadn't noticed her when I walked in, which I'd later learn was the whole point. "This is Rachel Dunn," Thomas said. "Private investigator. I hired her 6 weeks ago, the day your mother called you." Rachel was compact, 40s, short brown hair, no jewelry, a face that gave nothing away. She opened a laptop and turned it toward me. "Your brother owes $340,000, she said. "Mostly online gambling. His creditors are not patient people." She clicked through a timeline. Dean had discovered the will 6 months earlier by breaking into the vacant house on Hubbard Street and finding a draft copy in Grandpa's desk. "He told your mother." Together, they devised the vacation plan. Rachel's voice was clinical, precise. Step 1. Reconnect. Step 2. Get you to sign the family trust document, transferring control to Dean. Step 3. She pulled up a new set of messages. Dean to V, a man named Victor, with a criminal record for aggravated assault and extortion. If she doesn't sign, we go to Plan B. What's Plan B? Make it look like an accident. She doesn't know anyone here. Balcony. Pool. Whatever's clean. I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. Your brother was arranging your murder, Rachel said. Then she showed me the message I couldn't look away from. Dean, to Margaret. Time-stamped 2 days before the trip. She's not signing. We may need the backup plan. Margaret's reply. Do what you have to do. Just keep me out of it. My own mother. 8 words. No hesitation. I stood up. I said, excuse me. I walked to the restroom at the end of the hall. I locked the door. And I cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was 11, standing in the rain with a garbage bag. My whole body convulsed. The fluorescent light buzzed above me like a hive. When I came back to the table, my eyes were swollen and my voice was raw, but I was done falling apart. What do we do now? I said. Thomas began explaining the next steps. Legal filings, coordination with law enforcement, protective measures. He was halfway through a sentence about a restraining order when the room narrowed to a pinpoint and the floor rushed up to meet me. I woke on my back. A paramedic was kneeling beside me, pressing 2 fingers to my wrist. You're okay, he said. Your blood pressure dropped. Can you count backward from 10? I counted. I stared at the ceiling tiles. I thought about Grandpa opening the door in the rain, kneeling on the wet porch, not asking questions. He knew this would happen. Maybe not the details. Not Victor, not the balcony, not the pool. But he knew the shape of it. He knew what Margaret and Dean were capable of, and he spent his last years building a wall between them and me. Thomas sat in the chair beside me, patient as a clock. He handed me a paper cup of water. Take your time, he said. But don't take too long. Your brother doesn't know you've left yet. I sat up, drank the water, steadied my voice. I don't want revenge, I said. I want the truth on the table. All of it. Thomas nodded like he'd been waiting for exactly those words. Then he reached into his briefcase and set down the sealed envelope. Cream-colored, wax seal, my grandmother's handwriting. The same one he'd given me at Grandpa's funeral 14 years ago. You never opened it, he said. I hadn't. I'd carried it across 6 apartments, 4 cities, and 1 entire career. It had traveled in jacket pockets and shoeboxes and the bottom of filing cabinets. I'd touched it 100 times and never broken the seal. Open it when you're ready, Thomas said. Your grandmother Rosemary wrote it the week before she passed. I slipped the envelope into my bag. Not yet, but soon. First, I had a brother to stop. Thomas arranged a room at a hotel in Hartford. Quiet, clean, away from anything with the name Farrell attached to it. Grace flew in from Boston that same night. She walked through the door, dropped her bag, and wrapped her arms around me without a word. Then she said what Grace always says. I told you not to go. I know. I leaned into her shoulder. But if I didn't go, they would have found me eventually. She didn't argue. She knew I was right. While Grace ordered room service, I couldn't eat. The machinery of consequences was grinding forward 2 states away. Connecticut State Police had coordinated with law enforcement in South Carolina. The plan was clean. Arrest Victor first at Hilton Head, then take Dean the following morning back in Glastonbury. I sat on the hotel bed while Grace dozed in the armchair. Midnight. The city hummed outside the window. I pulled the envelope from my bag. The wax cracked like a whisper. Inside, 1 sheet of stationery, pale yellow, and a photograph. Rosemary's handwriting was careful, deliberate, the kind of penmanship they taught in schools that don't exist anymore. My dearest Willow, if you're reading this, it means your grandfather is gone and I'm gone, and someone is trying to take what's yours. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you while I was alive, but I want you to know, you were never the problem. Your mother was broken long before you were born, and she broke you instead of fixing herself. You deserve the world, little bird. Build your own nest. Grandma R. The photograph. Me at 5 years old, sitting on Rosemary's lap, both of us laughing at something outside the frame. On the back, in pencil, 4 words. You were always enough. Grace woke up to find me sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding the photo, tears running silent and clean. She didn't ask. She sat beside me, took my hand, and stayed there. At 1:47 a.m., my phone lit up. Thomas. Victor has been arrested. He's cooperating. Your brother will be arrested at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. I set the phone down and looked at the photograph one more time. 5 years old. Laughing. Enough. 7 a.m. sharp. 2 unmarked cars pulled up to Margaret's house in Glastonbury. Dean was at the kitchen table eating cereal when they knocked. He answered the door in sweatpants. The officers read him his rights while Margaret screamed from the porch in a bathrobe, clutching the railing like the house was sinking. I know these details because Rachel Dunn sent me a brief report that afternoon. Clean. Factual. No editorializing. That was Rachel's way. Margaret's call came 40 minutes after the arrest. What have you done? She was hyperventilating. They took your brother. He didn't do anything. He hired someone to kill me, Mom. Silence. Long enough to hear a clock ticking somewhere in her house. That's ridiculous. Dean would never. You're making this up to get back at us. The police have the messages. All of them. I let that settle. Including yours. What messages? I read it from the screenshot on my phone, word for word. Do what you have to do, just keep me out of it. That was you. 10 seconds of nothing, then quieter. That was about the trust documents, not about hurting you. That's for the judge to decide. I hung up, set the phone face down on the nightstand, didn't pick it up again for 6 hours. Over the next few days, the pieces sorted themselves. Dean was held without bail. The nature of the charge, plus Victor's cooperation, made him a flight risk. Amber Jennings vanished. Checked out of the resort the morning of Dean's arrest, canceled her phone number, left no forwarding address. Thomas called that evening. We need to move on the inheritance claim. Your grandfather's property in Glastonbury has been sitting empty for 14 years. He paused. He left instructions about what to do with it. Margaret, meanwhile, had already hired an attorney. Within 24 hours, her lawyer filed a motion to invalidate the will, claiming Grandpa Walter had lacked testamentary capacity when he signed it. The fight for the truth was just beginning. Margaret had always been better at narrative than truth. Within 48 hours of Dean's arrest, she transformed herself from complicit mother into grieving victim. She posted on her church group's Facebook page, the one with 900 members and a shared prayer list. My daughter is trying to steal her grandfather's inheritance and put my innocent son in jail. Please pray for our family. It worked. My phone started ringing. Numbers I hadn't seen in 20 years. Some callers were polite, cautious even. Others were not. A woman from Margaret's Bible study left a voicemail calling me ungrateful. A man whose name I didn't recognize said I should be ashamed of what I was doing to my poor mother. I didn't respond to any of them. There was no point in fighting a story that had been running for 21 years. But then a call came from someone I didn't expect. Willow? This is Patricia Boyd. I lived 3 houses down from your mother on Sunset Terrace. I remembered her. Barely. A tall woman with garden gloves who waved from her driveway. Your mother told everyone you ran away at 11 because you were a troubled kid, Mrs. Boyd said. Her voice was steady but thin. I believed her for 20 years. She paused. But last week I saw the police report. What police report? The night you left. A neighbor, me, actually, called the police because I saw a child walking alone in the rain carrying a garbage bag. An officer went to your mother's house. She told him you'd gone to stay with relatives voluntarily. They closed the case. A police report. Filed the night I was thrown out. Margaret had lied to the officer's face and the case had simply disappeared. I didn't know about any of it. I'm calling because I owe you an apology, Mrs. Boyd said. I should have followed up. I should have looked harder. I didn't. Thomas later confirmed. Grandpa Walter had kept a copy of that police report. It was in the file alongside the will. He'd known about it from the beginning. And then Thomas told me something that broke me open all over again. Your grandfather tried to get legal custody of you, multiple times. Margaret threatened to accuse him of abuse if he didn't back off. He chose to protect you from the shadows instead. My grandfather had fought for me, and my mother had used a lie like a loaded gun to stop him. I didn't fight back on social media. I didn't post a rebuttal. I didn't call Margaret's church friends to plead my case. Instead, I did what Grandpa taught me. I built something. Thomas filed the petition to validate the will with the Hartford Probate Court. The hearing was set for 2 weeks out. Margaret's attorney had already submitted the diminished capacity argument, claiming Grandpa Walter was mentally unfit when he signed. It was a common tactic, Thomas said, and almost always a losing one when the signer had a clean psychiatric evaluation on file, which Grandpa Walter did, dated 2 weeks before the will was signed, conducted by Dr. Alan Fielding, a board-certified psychiatrist still practicing in New Haven. Full competency confirmed. But Thomas had more. He arrived at the hotel one afternoon carrying a wooden box. Oak. Old. Brass latch. I recognized it instantly. The box from Grandpa's top shelf. The one he never opened in front of me. Your grandfather's house has been sealed since his death, Thomas said. This was in the master closet. He left instructions that I should give it to you when the legal process began. I opened it. Inside, 7 leather-bound notebooks. Grandpa Walter's handwriting. A diary spanning 7 years. From the year I moved in to the year he died. I opened the first one at random. March 2009. Called Margaret again. She said Willow is better off without this family. Maybe she's right, but not in the way Margaret means it. He'd documented everything. Every phone call to Margaret. Every refusal. Every legal attempt to bring me home. Every quiet act of protection that I never knew about. Your grandfather didn't just plan for your future, Thomas said, adjusting his glasses. He documented the past. He knew this fight was coming. I called Mrs. Boyd that evening. Would you be willing to testify? I asked. About what you saw that night? About Margaret telling the police I'd gone to stay with relatives? Yes, she said, without hesitation. I should have done it 21 years ago. Meanwhile, Grace helped me connect with a nonprofit organization that specialized in transitional housing for youth aging out of foster care. Grandpa's house on Hubbard Street had been empty for 14 years. His will included a specific note about the property. Not a clause, not a condition. Just a line in the margins of his own handwriting. For the children who need a door opened. I was starting to see the full picture now. My grandfather hadn't just saved me. He'd designed a blueprint for what came next. He just didn't live long enough to hand me the key himself. 3 days before the hearing, Dean's defense attorney reached out to Thomas with an offer. Dean would plead guilty to criminal solicitation, a lesser charge, in exchange for Willow not pursuing civil damages. Thomas relayed the message over the phone. I don't want his money, I said. I want him to face what he did. That same afternoon, Margaret called. Not crying this time. No church voice. No trembling hands you could hear through the speaker. This Margaret was the one I remembered from childhood. The real one. Cold. Measured. Stripped of performance. Drop the charges, she said. Walk away. Or I will make sure every person in this state knows what kind of daughter you are. What kind is that? The kind who destroys her own family. I let the silence sit for 3 full seconds. You destroyed this family 21 years ago on a rainy Tuesday night, I said. I was just the evidence. I hung up. Thomas spent that week assembling everything. The validated will, the psychiatric evaluation, the police report from 2003, Walter's diaries, the text messages between Dean and Victor, the text between Dean and Margaret, Mrs. Boyd's sworn statement, Rachel Dunn's investigative report. The courtroom will be full, Thomas warned me. Margaret's church friends, neighbors, local press may show up. Good, I said. The truth works best in the open. That night, alone in the hotel, I returned to the oak box. I'd read most of the diaries, but at the very bottom, beneath the last notebook, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A savings book, a college education fund. The name on the account, Willow Farrell. Opened the day I was born. The final entry was a deposit dated 3 months before Grandpa died, and on the last page in his careful engineer's handwriting, for the nest you'll build yourself. Sitting there, holding that savings book with my name on it, a name my grandfather wrote on the day I was born, I realized something. He never forgot me. not for a single day. Even when I thought I was completely alone in the world, someone was quietly building a floor beneath me so I wouldn't fall through. I wonder, have you ever discovered, years later, that someone loved you in silence? That the luck you thought you had was actually someone's careful, invisible plan to keep you safe? If you have, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I think we don't say these things often enough. I closed the box, set my alarm, and laid out my clothes for court. Tomorrow, the truth would have a room full of witnesses. Hartford Probate Court, Courtroom 3B, 9:15 on a Tuesday morning. The room was full. Margaret's church friends filled one side, a cluster of women in modest blouses, clutching purses, whispering. On the other side, Mrs. Boyd in a navy dress. Grace, steady as a wall. 2 reporters from the Hartford Courant with notebooks open, a sketch artist. And scattered throughout, neighbors from Glastonbury who'd come because small towns run on stories, and this was the biggest one in decades. Margaret sat at the respondents' table. Black dress, silver cross, a tissue balled in her right hand. Her attorney, a slender man with rimless glasses, shuffled papers with a confidence that would dissolve within the hour. The hearing opened. Margaret's lawyer presented the diminished capacity claim. He described Walter Ashford as elderly, isolated, possibly influenced by his attorney. He said the word confused 3 times. Thomas stood. He placed the psychiatric evaluation on the judge's bench. Signed, dated, unambiguous. Full cognitive competency, confirmed by Dr. Alan Fielding, 2 weeks before the will was executed. Then he opened the diary. He read aloud the entry from November 14th, 2003. The night I was thrown out. Grandpa's handwriting. Grandpa's words. Margaret called at 9 p.m., said she put Willow out. The child walked 3 miles in the rain to my door. She was 11. She was shaking. I called Margaret back. She said, "Keep her. I don't want her." The courtroom went quiet. Not church quiet. Grave quiet. Margaret shot to her feet. "That's a lie. He made that up." "Sit down, ma'am," the judge said. Thomas called Mrs. Boyd to the stand. She walked slowly, hands folded. She described the night, the rain, the child, the garbage bag, the 911 call. She described the officer going to Margaret's house. She described what Margaret told him. She said her daughter had gone to stay with family, Mrs. Boyd said, voluntarily. She looked directly at Margaret. That was a lie. I watched that little girl walk down the street soaking wet. There was nothing voluntary about it. One of the church women in the back set down her purse and didn't pick it up again. During the 15-minute recess, Margaret crossed the aisle and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was tight. Her eyes were dry now. No performance left. "You're killing me," she whispered. "Is that what you want?" I looked down at her hand on my arm. I removed it, gently, finger by finger, and met her eyes. "No. I just want the truth to have a voice." The judge returned. The room rearranged itself into silence. Thomas presented the final pieces, the psychiatric evaluation. The 2 signing witnesses, Dr. Alan Fielding and Martha Bowen, the town librarian. Both still alive, both prepared to confirm. The 20-year chain of custody that Thomas had maintained on every document. Clean, unbroken, airtight. The judge reviewed the file for 8 minutes that felt like 80. Then he spoke. "The court finds the will of Walter H. Ashford to be valid and duly executed. The petitioner, Willow Farrell, is recognized as the sole designated beneficiary." Margaret's head dropped. Not dramatically, not the way she'd performed grief at the funeral. This was real. Her shoulders folded in. Her attorney put his hand on her arm, and she shook it off. No one from the church pews moved to comfort her. Thomas wasn't finished. He informed the court that evidence pertaining to a related criminal matter, the conspiracy involving Dean Farrell, was being entered into the public record and forwarded to the criminal division. He presented the text messages, all of them. Dean to Victor. "Make it look natural. She doesn't know anyone here." Victor to Dean. "Plan B costs double." Dean to Margaret. "She's not signing. We may need the backup plan. And Margaret, in 8 words that echoed through that courtroom like a gunshot. Do what you have to do. Just keep me out of it. The church women stared at Margaret as if she'd removed a mask they didn't know she was wearing. A reporter scribbled so fast her pen scratched audibly against her notepad. The judge noted that the criminal prosecution of Dean Farrell for criminal solicitation would proceed separately. Potential maximum sentence, 20 years. He turned to Margaret. Ma'am, the contents of your communications may be subject to further review by the state's attorney. I'd advise you to consult your counsel. Margaret didn't move. She sat perfectly still, staring at the table, as if the world had gone on without her and she was just now noticing. I stood up, walked past her, didn't look down. You've won, she said to my back. Quiet, stripped. Happy now? I stopped. Didn't turn around. This was never about winning. I kept walking. Outside the courthouse, the September sun was almost offensive in its brightness. The world hadn't stopped. Traffic hummed. A man across the street was eating a hot dog. A reporter from the Current approached me on the steps. She was young, late 20s, ponytail, a recorder in her hand. Ms. Farrell, do you have a comment? I'd been thinking about this moment since the night I opened Rosemary's letter. Not rehearsing. Deciding. What does a person say when the worst of her life becomes public record? She says what matters next. My grandfather Walter Ashford spent his life building things, I said. He built houses. He built futures. And even after he was gone, he built mine. The reporter waited. His home in Glastonbury has been empty for 14 years. I'm turning it into a transitional home for young people aging out of foster care. It's what he wanted. He wrote it down. What will it be called? Ashford Nest. I paused, because my grandmother once told me, build your own nest. Behind me, I heard Mrs. Boyd make a sound, a small intake of breath that turned into a sob she caught with her hand. The reporter asked the question I knew was coming. What about your mother? That's a private matter. Do you forgive her? 3 seconds of silence. I let them pass. Forgiveness is a process, I said. But boundaries are a decision. I've made mine. Grace stood a few feet behind me, arms crossed, smiling the way Grace smiles, more with her jaw than her mouth. She nodded once. Thomas shook my hand on the bottom step. Your grandfather would be proud. I know, I said. As the reporter walked away, Mrs. Boyd touched my arm. I want to volunteer at Ashford Nest, she said. Her eyes were red. I owe you 21 years. Then she added quietly. There are 3 other neighbors who saw things back then. We were all too scared of your mother to speak up. She straightened her shoulders. Not anymore. 1 week after the hearing, Margaret requested a meeting. She went through Thomas. I'd blocked her number the day of the trial. I agreed. Public place, neutral ground, a coffee shop on Main Street in Glastonbury called Bean and Spoke. Grace came along and sat 1 table over, pretending to read a magazine she was holding upside down. Margaret arrived without makeup. No cross necklace, no costume. She looked like a woman who'd been awake for a week, which she probably had. She'd aged 10 years in 7 days. She sat across from me and folded her hands. I'm sorry, she said. For which part? She blinked. For all of it. That's not specific enough for me to accept. Margaret started to cry. Quietly this time. No audience. No performance. I watched her face and tried to tell the difference between real tears and muscle memory. I couldn't. And for the first time in my life, I realized it didn't matter. I'm not going to press charges against you separately, I said. That's not mercy. It's just not worth my energy. But here's what's going to happen. She looked up. You will not contact me. You will not visit Ashford Nest. You will not speak about me publicly. If you do, Thomas has everything he needs to pursue conspiracy charges. I kept my voice flat, steady, the way you'd read the terms of a lease. This isn't a negotiation. I'm your mother, she said. You were, I said. You chose not to be, and I've accepted that. I stood. placed $8 on the table, my coffee and hers, picked up my jacket. Willow. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. Outside, the October air hit my face like cold water. Grace caught up with me on the sidewalk. You okay? No, I said, but I will be. We walked to the car in silence. Behind us, through the window of Bean and Spoke, Margaret Farrell sat alone at a table for two, both coffees untouched, staring at nothing. The criminal trial came 3 months later. Dean's attorney advised him to take the plea. The evidence was a mountain, and Victor, the man Dean had hired, was cooperating fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. There was no angle left to play. Dean pleaded guilty to criminal solicitation. The judge sentenced him to 8 years, eligible for parole after 5. Victor received 12. I was in the courtroom when Dean stood for sentencing. He wore a county-issued jumpsuit and the kind of expression I'd seen on men in documentaries. Not remorse, just the slow dawning recognition that their story wasn't going to end the way they planned. Before the bailiff let him out, Dean turned toward me. I thought, for one heartbeat, that he might apologize, that he might say something human. I just needed the money, he said. That was it. Not, I'm sorry I tried to kill you. Not, I was wrong. Just, I needed the money. As if I were an obstacle between him and a bank teller. I said nothing. I sat. I listened to the judge close the record. I walked out into a hallway that smelled like floor wax and old coats. Margaret was not charged. The text message, "Do what you have to do. Just keep me out of it," was damning in plain language but legally ambiguous. Her attorney argued it referred to the trust documents. The state's attorney declined to prosecute. Insufficient evidence for conspiracy. But the court of public opinion had already ruled. Margaret's church group quietly removed her from the volunteer roster. Neighbors stopped returning her calls. The Glastonbury she'd curated for 2 decades, the one where she was the devoted mother, and I was the troubled runaway, collapsed like a theater set after the lights come up. She sold the house on Sunset Terrace within a month and moved to a small apartment in Clearwater, Florida. Alone. Rachel Dunn's final report answered one last question. Amber Jennings wasn't Dean's girlfriend of 2 years. They'd met on a dating app 3 months before the trip. Rachel traced Amber's phone records. She'd texted Dean a photo of my passport and my flight itinerary the first night at the resort. That's how Dean knew my room number. That's how Victor would have found me. Amber was never charged. She simply ceased to exist in the story. A supporting actress who left when the production shut down. 6 months after the trial, the house on Hubbard Street was reborn. It took a crew of 14 volunteers, a contractor who gave us a discount after reading the Current article, and more coats of paint than I can count. We replaced the porch boards. We fixed the leaky kitchen faucet Grandpa had been getting around to for a decade. We sanded the hardwood floors and patched the drywall and hung new curtains in every room. I kept Grandpa's desk in the living room. On it, I placed the framed photograph of Rosemary and me, the oak box with his diaries inside, and a fresh mug of black coffee every morning, even though no one drank from it. Mrs. Boyd ran the daily operations. 4 other neighbors joined the volunteer board. People who'd spent 20 years believing Margaret's version of events, and now showed up with casseroles, cleaning supplies, and the quiet guilt of having looked the other way. Grace signed on as the health advisor. She drove down from Boston every other weekend and reorganized the medicine cabinet 3 times. My company, Hearthline, partnered as the tech arm, connecting each resident with a vetted mentor through our matching platform. We opened with 3 teenagers. The ceremony was small. No press. No ribbon cutting. Just me, standing in the living room where my grandfather used to read the paper, telling 3 young people the only thing I knew to be true. This house belongs to a man who believed in second chances. He gave me one. Now it's yours. A girl named Lily, 16, close-cropped hair, arms crossed tight against her chest like she was holding herself together, raised her hand. "Did your family throw you out too?" "Yes," I said. "And you turned out okay?" I thought about it. Not for drama, because I wanted to give her an honest answer. "I turned out honest," I said. That's better than okay. Lily uncrossed her arms. Just slightly, but I noticed. It happened on a Sunday. I was cleaning out the last of Grandpa's closet, the shelf behind the oak box, where old shoe boxes and tax folders had been stacked since the Clinton administration. At the bottom of the pile, I found a manila envelope, thick, heavy, sealed with clear packing tape and labeled in Grandpa's handwriting, "For Willow, when she's ready." Inside, 17 documents. Each one a petition for legal guardianship of a minor child, me, filed with the Connecticut Superior Court. The first was dated June 2003, 7 months after I arrived at his door. The last was from 2012, 2 years before he died. 17 petitions, 17 denials. Every single one had been contested by Margaret. Her objections were consistent. Walter Ashford is elderly. Walter Ashford is in declining health. Walter Ashford cannot provide a stable home environment. The same lies, copy-pasted year after year, stamped and filed by a woman who hadn't set foot in her father's house since she threw her daughter out of her own. I sat on the closet floor with the petitions fanned out around me like a collapsed deck of cards. 17 times he'd walked into a courtroom for me. 17 times my mother slammed the door. And he never told me. Not once. Thomas confirmed it that evening by phone. He didn't want you carrying that weight while you were building your life. He said, and these were his words, "Let her think she's free. She'll fight harder." But there was one more thing. Clipped to the 9th petition, the one from 2005, was a supporting affidavit signed by someone I hadn't thought about in over 20 years. My father, Robert Farrell, the man who left when I was 4 and never looked back. He had signed a document supporting Grandpa Walter's custody bid. 1 page, 1 signature, then silence again. No follow-up, no phone call, no contact. I don't know what it means. I haven't decided if it changes anything. But for the first time since I was a little girl, I thought about my father as something other than absence. I found a letter beneath the petitions, the last one Grandpa ever wrote to me, undated, unsigned, as if he'd started it, put down the pen, and never picked it up again. I failed you 17 times in court, but I will not fail you in my final act. Everything I have is yours. Use it to build what I couldn't, a home no one can take from you. I pressed the letter against my chest, closed my eyes, and let myself cry for the last time in this story. 3 months after Ashford Nest opened, Mrs. Boyd called me on a Wednesday afternoon. "Your mother is outside," she said. "She's just standing on the sidewalk, across the street, looking at the house." I walked out the front door. Margaret was on the opposite curb, wearing a beige coat and flat shoes. No makeup, no cross. She looked like a woman returning to a place that had moved on without her, which is exactly what she was. She saw me and didn't wave, just stood there, like she was waiting for permission to exist. "He gave it to you," she said. "The whole house. He gave it to the children who need it. I grew up in that house, and I was thrown out of yours. I stayed on my side of the street. She stayed on hers. We both have memories. The difference is what we do with them." Wind pushed a crumple of dry leaves between us. Somewhere inside, I could hear Lily helping a new resident find the bathroom. "Can I come in?" Margaret said. "Just once." I stood still for 5 seconds. I thought about the rain, the garbage bag, the phone call. Keep her. I don't want her. The 17 petitions, the text to Dean. I thought about all the rooms in my life that Margaret had either locked me out of or tried to break into. "No," I said. "This is their safe space, not yours." She nodded. Not dramatically, not with tears. Just a small, tired movement of her head, the kind you make when the doctor gives you the result you already expected. She turned and walked down Hubbard Street. Slowly, hands in her pockets. She didn't look back. I watched until she turned the corner and disappeared. Lily appeared behind me in the doorway. "Who was that?" I looked at the empty sidewalk where my mother had been. "Someone who lost something she can't get back." I stepped inside and closed the door. 1 year later and the house on Hubbard Street is never quiet. There's always someone microwaving leftovers at odd hours, someone playing music too loud in the upstairs bedroom, someone sitting at the kitchen table with a textbook open and a look on their face that says I might actually pull this off. It's not tidy. It's not cinematic. It's the kind of beautiful that comes with scuff marks on the baseboards and a chore wheel that nobody follows perfectly. 14 teens have passed through Ashford Nest. 6 have moved into their own apartments. 2 are in community college. 1 got a full scholarship to Central Connecticut State. The others are still here, still figuring it out, still learning that a safe place doesn't mean a perfect place. Hearthline crossed 3,000 mentor matches last quarter. I split my time between San Francisco and Glastonbury. 2 coasts, 2 lives, 1 purpose. I started therapy in the spring. I know. The woman who built a $47 million company from a dorm room couldn't figure out she needed a therapist. But I'd spent 20 years treating resilience like a replacement for healing. My therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Tran who drinks herbal tea and never lets me deflect, helped me understand that surviving isn't the same as being okay. Being strong doesn't mean being unbroken, she said during our 3rd session. It means healing out loud. I'm working on that. Grace visits Glastonbury every other weekend now. We cook in Grandpa's kitchen using Rosemary's recipes, her pot roast, her cornbread, her peach cobbler that never turns out right but tastes like home anyway. I hung a new photo on the refrigerator. Not Margaret, not Dean. It's me, Grace, Mrs. Boyd, Thomas, Lily, and the Ashford Nest kids, crowded together on the front porch, everyone mid-laugh. It's the kind of family photo nobody planned. It's my favorite thing I own. Thomas called on a Tuesday. I have something for you. Can you come by the office? He'd never asked me to come in person before. Everything since the trial had been phone calls and e-signatures. So I drove to his office in downtown Hartford. A 2nd-floor walk-up above a sandwich shop, which felt exactly right for a man who'd spent 30 years keeping his promises without needing a corner office to do it. He was standing by the window when I walked in. On his desk, a single envelope, cream-colored. No wax seal this time. Just my name in Grandpa's handwriting, slightly more unsteady than the last letter I'd read. Your grandfather left one final letter, Thomas said. He gave strict instructions. Deliver it exactly 1 year after the will was confirmed in court. He paused. Today is that day. I sat down. I opened it. Dear little bird, if Thomas gave you this letter, it means you survived. I knew you would. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to see it. I'm sorry I couldn't fight louder. But I hope you know. Every day you lived on your own, you proved that love isn't about blood. It's about choice. You chose to keep going. You chose to be kind when the world gave you every reason not to be. You chose to build instead of burn. I'm leaving you everything not because you need it, but because you'll use it right. Don't be angry at your mother forever. She's carrying a weight I couldn't lift for her. But don't let her carry it into your house either. Build your nest. Fill it with people who choose you back. I chose you. Every single day. Grandpa Walter. I folded the letter along its creases, placed it in my jacket pocket against my chest. Thank you, I said, for everything. Thomas took off his glasses, cleaned them with his tie, cleared his throat. It was the honor of my career, Willow. We shook hands. I held on a beat longer than usual. He let me. I walked down the stairs, past the sandwich shop, into the afternoon light, carrying a letter from a man who'd chosen me every single day, even the days I didn't know I needed choosing. That evening, Ashford Nest. Dinner was spaghetti. Overcooked, underseasoned, made by a 17-year-old named Marcus who swore he followed the recipe. Nobody complained. 2 kids argued about basketball. Lily stole garlic bread off someone's plate. Mrs. Boyd told everyone to use napkins. After cleanup, Lily found me in the hallway with her laptop. Can you help me with my college essay? What's your topic? She shrugged, looked at the floor, then at me. The people who saved me. I sat on the bench beside her. Write about the person who saved yourself. That's a better essay. She didn't say anything for a second. Then she opened the laptop and started typing. Later, I sat on the front porch. Grandpa's porch. The same spot where he used to drink black coffee from his world's okay-est grandpa mug and wave at Mrs. Boyd across the street. I looked down Hubbard Street, the same road I'd walked in the rain 21 years ago, trash bag over my shoulder, sneakers full of water. The same road Margaret had walked down 3 months ago, hands in her pockets, not looking back. The same road Grandpa had carried me in from the night I arrived at his door. The road hadn't changed. But I had. I pulled out my phone, the photo of Rosemary and me, 5 years old, laughing, always laughing. On the back, in pencil, "You were always enough." I put the phone away, leaned back, breathed in the cold Glastonbury air. Above me, the stars did what they always do, showed up without being asked. That's my story. It's not pretty. It's not tied with a ribbon. My brother is in prison. My mother lives alone in Florida. I don't hate either of them, but I don't open my door for them either. Here's what I learned. And I'm not saying this as advice. I'm saying it as someone who walked 3 miles in the rain at 11 years old and spent the next 2 decades trying to understand why. You don't owe loyalty to people who confuse control with love. You don't owe forgiveness on someone else's timeline. And you absolutely don't owe your silence to protect people who wouldn't protect you. If you're in a family that makes you feel small, that makes you question whether you're worth the trouble of keeping. Let me say this as clearly as I can. Leaving is not betrayal. Boundaries are not cruelty. And building a life they didn't plan for you is not revenge. It's survival. My grandfather knocked on the same door 17 times for me. 17 petitions. 17 refusals. He never stopped. If no one has knocked on yours yet, consider this my knock. Build your nest. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story touched something real in you, hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. If you have your own story about setting boundaries with family, about walking away and finding out it was actually walking toward something, the comments are yours. I read every single one. And if you want another story about someone who refused to stay small, check the link in the description. I think you'll see yourself in it. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.